Welcome everybody to the Wake Up Call channel. I want to keep everybody informed on some of the propaganda that's out there, including stories like this that they keep putting out about imminent terror attacks occurring on U.S. soil. One of the stories is the U.S. is facing a threat that echoes the run-up of 9/11, according to an ex-CIA chief. And of course, I'm going to play for you this clip that they played on the mainstream media on Good Morning America, or the Today Show, I should say. You know, another one of these shows that a lot of people tune into, and they program them, they condition them for when they do plan an attack in this country, which they are planning to do, to have all of these scenarios already built into their heads, right? They don't do anything to prevent these attacks because they're the ones responsible for it. But what they need to do is build up in your head that these are all the reasons that America could be attacked, like the border, like this newest narrative of this ISIS spin-off group, ISIS-K, right? Pretty incredible people believe the narrative with ISIS, when all they really have to do is look at the origins of ISIS and see that it's actually a group created from the CIA and the Mossad. So they technically work for our own government. So any attack that occurs, while they tell us that we're at a very high level of risk here in the United States of America, always remember it will be from within. They build this narrative out so that when it happens, you already know who potentially could be to blame. Could it be Russia? Could it be China? Could it be ISIS-K? Could it be this newest narrative of Korea, North Korea and Russia teaming together? Could it even be your own fellow countrymen, which is the funniest narrative they could possibly give? Because again, remember, something catastrophic needs to occur on U.S. soil to really entice this civil division. And that would be a false flag. Of course, the culprit would be the MAGA extreme right. They haven't been building this narrative out year after year after year because they care about how you vote at the polls. They've been building it out because they've been trying to convince you that your own fellow civilian in this country is a terror threat. And they even give you a little bit of that propaganda in this story. Take a look at what they're pushing on the Today Show.
New alarm bells about the threat of terrorism in America from a former top intelligence official. Warning in foreign affairs, the United States faces a serious threat of a terrorist attack in the months ahead. Former acting CIA Director Michael Morell with national security expert Graham Allison comparing the current threat level to the run-up to 9/11 and pointing to testimony from FBI Director Christopher Wray on the impact of the Hamas attack on Israel.
We've seen the threat from foreign terrorists rise to a whole nother level after October 7th.
And from other top Biden administration officials.
Now, we are in an elevated global threat environment.
Every morning, we worry about this question. We try to track anyone who might be trying to hurt the country.
Last week, U.S. immigration officials arrested 8 men from Tajikistan for potential ties to ISIS in Central Asia. 2 people familiar with the matter tell NBC News the men entered the U.S. through the southern border, some as recently as last year, and that their criminal background checks came back clean when they crossed. House Republicans for months have blamed President Biden's immigration positions.
That as a result of the administration's policies allowing people to cross the border unvetted, we have terrorists that are actively working inside the United States that are a threat.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials recorded more than 200 encounters with individuals on the terror watch list at the southern border in fiscal year 2023, and nearly twice as many on the northern border. Altogether, just a fraction, less than 0.5% of all CBP encounters that year. The White House says Congress must do more, pointing to the sweeping border security bill killed by Republicans earlier this year.
Everybody can talk a good game, but you can't really change what's happening at the border unless you have legislation. There's no magic wand that can be waved here to make it all go away.
The biggest threat we face are attacks overseas against our embassies, against our military bases. I think there is a threat against the homeland, but it's going to be much harder to penetrate our defenses.
So, Hallie, is there any indication that the president would consider raising the terror threat alert level, for example, in light of all of this?
Yeah, it's a good question, Savannah. There's no current advisory now, and top national security spokesperson John Kirby says he's not aware of a decision to change that, but that it's something that the White House, the administration, is watching very closely every day. The concern remains not just groups like ISIS-K, which is that ISIS offshoot blamed for attacks this year in Iran and Moscow, but domestic violent extremists as well. Savannah?
So they give you all this stuff, right? And the thing that people should be doing is saying to themselves, well, why do these people who work for us, who are supposed to be here protecting us, why do they keep telling us that we're going to be attacked, we're going to be attacked, we're going to be attacked? Why do they keep telling us that one of the reasons is what's going on at the border? Why do they keep telling us this stuff? They tell you this stuff because they're conditioning you for when it happens, for you to believe what they tell you is the reason and to make it believable. Remember, for decades, everybody in the United States of America felt like they were untouchable. 70s, 80s, 90s, as if nothing could occur on U.S. soil until the 11th day of September back in 2001. And since then, the only attacks that have been on American soil have been attacks around schools and those types of things, which again is your own government doing it, just like on the 11th day of September when your own government was working with Mossad to create those attacks. So the stories that are out there, again, they keep circulating it because the more you get conditioned, the more you hear this stuff, it just gets ingrained in you, right? It's the same. I just tell people, look, because they don't realize, they keep hearing this story. Like, why do I keep hearing stories about terror threats? Why do I keep hearing stories about grid shutdowns, right? They don't realize, well, when you go to school, how many times do you hear the same thing over and over again? Does anybody think, what did you learn from 4th to 5th to 6th to 7th to 8th grade? Did you learn all these new things? You get repeated history, right? Repeated fake history, repeated this, repeated that. Oh, you might learn a little bit of new math, but it's the same thing. It's indoctrinated and ingrained into your skull because repetition is the key to mind control. So these stories are repetitive for a reason. So this article says another member of Congress has warned a terror attack is imminent. The latest warning comes from a former CIA director who argued that similar warning signs exist today that did just before the 9/11 terror attack occurred. U.S. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Turner from Ohio told CBS News Face the Nation Sunday, "We are at the highest level of a possible terrorist threat resulting from a Biden administration policies." He issued the warning after 8 foreign nationals traveling from Tajikistan with ties to ISIS were arrested. The men were released, as you heard, into the country by U.S. Border Patrol agents, right? After they were apprehended for illegally entering the U.S. through the southwest border. So they're conditioning you and preparing you for a story revolving around the border. But they're also conditioning you, as you heard in that story, the liberal media, they're also conditioning the liberals out there to believe that a terror attack could be imminent from the Republican Party, right? Because when they say domestic terror, there's no longer this thought or this notion of, hey, is it domestic terror? Like, did an American join ISIS and is turning on America? The domestic terror that they're building up in people's mind is MAGA, okay? That's the new terror threat, and Dems believe this narrative fully. Somehow, these people actually believe that January 6th wasn't an orchestrated government event. Even though they, you can look at it, you can look at the video proof, and you can see people scaling on the building like Spider-Man, okay? And you can't look to yourself and say, wait a minute, do you think my next door neighbor, just some regular people, could scale on a building? Clearly, they're black ops, okay? Clearly, they're trained military men who are scaling buildings, because regular people like me and you probably couldn't scale buildings that were completely like made of cement, where you could barely even find somewhere to grip yourself. They were scaling it really well. It's very easy to see that it was government oriented, right? And the reason the government's creating these events is they're trying to create a civil war in this country. And all it'll take is one big attack. If they create one big fake 9/11-like attack, guess what? Guess what? They could bring about a new world order. If they bring an attack like that and they take down buildings or something along those lines, or even a government building, which is a very likely scenario, right? Election denying outcome this fall. Nobody believes that the government does something to the Senate building or the House building. A lot of people are going to believe that it actually is MAGA doing it because they're election deniers, because they've been programmed to think that. Then they could start moving us much easier than they did in the past. Then they could really just say, look, we have 2 separate countries now. We have Republicans, we have Democrats. They're 2 separate species of people, which we could see that is headed in that direction, right? Where we actually have people so indoctrinated with democratic communism that they're actually okay with just normal things that you say, whoa, government should have no say in this. The government should have no say in that. They're fine with the government telling us we should castrate kids and things like that. And these are people who are parents themselves. And even if they go, well, I'm not going to do it to my own kid, they're still on board with other parents doing it to theirs, which shows you they have no common critical thinking going on whatsoever. They just believe the science, right? Which means they believe the propaganda. So this goes on to say the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force and Department of Homeland Security agents arrested the 8 alleged terrorists in Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and New York. So again, programming you to think a big city, which it's very likely to be again. They're currently in immigration and customs enforcement custody pending removal proceedings. Turner said what's important about these reports is that a terror threat is no longer speculative, no longer hypothetical, okay? It's going to happen. Remember, they've been telling us that it's going to happen. They've been telling us that's going to happen, that there's going to be a terror threat, while telling us that the border's wide open, while telling us that Russia wants to come in here, that China wants to come in here, telling us that our own civilians want to attack the government. Okay, so this is all programmed in. The other thing they keep telling us is there's going to be a cyber attack, a terror attack, and a cyber attack. And the other thing is the grid, right? These are repetitive narratives. When you hear repetitive narratives, understand why you're hearing it. They're conditioning you so that when it happens, not only are you not shocked, you're desensitized to it, and you already have these built-in boogeymen. They don't ever, they cannot ever have the civilians realize that it's their own government who's doing this to them. It's got to be some foretold boogeyman so that they can have the outcome that they want. If everybody realized that the government was working together, the Republicans and the Democrats, to sabotage, the civilians would uprise, period. No pun intended with the word uprise. That's what would occur. That is absolutely what would occur. If the civilians pulled out and said, okay, wait a minute. Trump and these guys are gatekeeping us. The Democrats are being brainwashed. Everybody, they're all working together. They're all in cahoots. If you saw pictures of them underground hanging out, if you saw Biden doing shots with Trump in their Bohemian Grove outfits and their tighty whities, everybody would go, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, something's going on here. Civilians would get so angered by this and triggered by it that they would unite like never before and rise up against this small group of people. They cannot have that happen. So the propaganda is very, very thick, and these government agents keep coming out telling you it's going to happen because it is going to happen. We know it's going to happen, but it's not going to happen the way they say. It's sabotage. I expect this to be probably after the election, somewhere in Washington would be my guess, okay? I don't think that it would be, the Republicans are going after a building in Los Angeles. I think it would be something in D.C., likely even the White House could be a potential target. Something that would be so monumental, make people's heads explode, where they'd say, we can't live with these people anymore. They're fully against democracy. They're no longer, American citizen. That's what we're headed towards. That's part of the New World Order plan. And people out there go, that's a little extreme. There's no way that they're going to do that. We know that the New World Order is imminent. The New World Order cannot be completed without America coming down to its knees. America is the biggest threat to the New World Order. Okay, despite the psychological aspects of what they're doing in this country, the civilians in this country are armed. The civilians in this country, there's a lot of them who are awake, and there's civilians in this country who will not take government overreach like other countries. The stuff people put up with in Australia, the stuff people put up with in the UK, even when we see stuff in the UK with the climate agenda, right, where we actually see people in the UK believing the climate propaganda so much that they're letting the government turn off their electricity, turn off their heat and their air condition, not realizing what's really going on. So in America, that stuff is still viewed as government overreach, at least from half of the population. And really what people like me who aren't Republican or Democrat want is to be left alone, right? And you could see that they will not leave us alone, but they want to make sure that while they're not leaving us alone, that we believe their propaganda. And we believe that all these bad things that keep happening, don't be suspicious of how there's an outbreak. The stuff that's going on is so rampant. It's every single day. Nobody remembers like in 2005 to 2015, 16, 17, there's barely anything going on in the news. It'd be like, this is going on over in Afghanistan. Oh, okay, right. Now it's like every day on U.S. there's all these false flags, there's all these psyops, right? People don't realize the government's bombarding them and just doing everything they can to bombard you with this propaganda. Because the government's plan here is more than government overreach. It's government control of your every move. That's what this is. This is tyranny like we've never seen before. And of course, this is all enabled by technology. Break free from the technology, then you can break free from the government control. But the more we've little by little allowed them to integrate technology as, okay, you got to do this online, you got to bank online, you got to PayPal online, the more control they've gained. And now that they've had that control, now they need to do the psychological ops to convince you that your next door neighbor could be the new Osama bin Laden, right? And that's what they're doing. People really, this is working on people. We see it like never before, right? Literally, your next door neighbor, if he's not believing in the same political ideologies, right? If you're a Democrat, your next door neighbor is a conservative, They think that he could be the next bin Laden. They think that he could go to their local Congress. He's got Trump flag in his yard. He could be blowing up a building. They've convinced them of this. Done by design. So they're out there, they're warning you of these things for a reason. They're not wasting airtime. People out there just go, well, they do that stuff to scare you. They do this stuff to scare you. It's more than scare, okay? Anybody who's scared by it is obviously an extremely weak person. It's to condition you. What would the point of scaring you be? They could scare you with anything they want, okay? Scaring you to think this is to condition and program you before something occurs so that you believe whatever they tell you it is. And they say, former Deputy Director Mike Morrill also recently warned that a terror attack could occur in the next few months ahead of the election. In an op-ed published by Foreign Affairs, he drew parallels to warnings issued to get ahead of 9/11, saying terrorism warning lights are blinking red again. Terror threat warnings continue after GOP House members have demanded answers about U.S. military base breaches after Chinese men and Jordanian men illegally entered the country. Republican senators have also warned that because of President Biden's open border policies, our country is really at an increased threat for a terror attack. Listen to the words and how they word that. And then ask yourself, why would they even tell us this? Why would they tell us that China is buying up land in America? Well, they don't have to tell us these things. Think about how many things you've never heard about. You've never heard about them for a reason, right? The government's gaslighting people, telling you about this stuff, telling you the border's open. China's got men in the country. We got Al-Qaeda in the country. All these groups are just getting into the country. Well, why are they telling you this? Why are the House senators telling you this? Telling you this and doing what? Nothing about it, right? Gaslighting people, but people are getting so angry about it. They're watching the Republican politicians and instead of going, hey, they're not going to do something about them. The civilians should, or the civilians should overthrow these people, throw them out and re-elect to a new election, prove to us that you were actually elected in the first place. Instead, they hear them and they can see that they're going, all right, we're going to have to separate. The Democrats are just not doing this right. Rules for thee, not for me. And it's working. It's working. So this is just more programming out there. The articles, the titles of them all are echoes of 9/11, highest level threats that we've seen in decades, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Boogeyman here, boogeyman there, boogeyman on your own soil. But guess what? The boogeyman is your government, Republicans and Democrats working together. When this stuff happens, remember that. They're going to feed propaganda out there immediately, even if it's a grid shutdown. And the propaganda is going to immediately point people towards one of these boogeymen. And then people are never going to believe or realize it's their own government. And we have to get that into people's heads. It is sabotage. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're doing well. God bless you as always and your families.